All right, we got this. One take. We're gonna knock this out the park. Okay, enough chicken sounds. Hey there, it's Grant with Elru Bike, and about 6 months ago I bought a brand new bike. This guy right here, the Pivot Trail 429. And when I spec'd out the build on this bike, I knew I wanted to try a bunch of different stuff. My previous bike, the Pivot Mach 6, I had that for about 9 years, so I was super ready to try a bunch of new components. And besides that, moving from a 160 to a 120 bike, everything's basically going to be different. Now, this is the third part of our series on looking at the build for this particular bike and trying to answer the question, would I make those same choices today that I did 6 months ago and about 600 miles ago after having lived with this thing? Alright, so a little bit of background. I'm just a regular guy that likes to mountain bike. No one's paying me for this. No one's giving me free stuff. In fact, I bought all of this stuff here with my own money. So as a result of that, for this comparison, I don't have a whole lot of like side-by-side stuff or side-by-side bikes to really compare this with. What I have is my previous bike, the Pivot Mach 6, a couple of demo bikes that I used before I bought this bike, and then obviously my experience with this bike. So instead of other components I'll be comparing against, I'll be comparing my experience with this particular bike. Do I enjoy using this component? Does this component bring me happiness? Does it add to my experience? Is it easy to own? Easy to maintain? So really, do I enjoy using it is what I'm going to be basing my decision on here. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. What are we talking about today? Shifters. What kind of shifters? The SRAM X01 Axs electronic shifters. Electronic? Oh yeah. I have so many questions. All right, let's get into it. Why did I pick them? All right, so before I settled on the 429 as my bike, I had demoed a couple of different bikes, and all of those bikes happened to have the Shimano XT build kit. And I remember distinctly feeling when I was demoing those bikes that I could never quite get in the right gear ratios, or something just felt a little wrong, whether I was in too high or too low of a gear. I didn't really jive with that shifting system. On my Mach 6, I had the SRAM X01 mechanical group set, and maybe I was just used to that and how it felt, but something just didn't click with me in that Shimano XT. So when the guy asked me what group set I wanted to put on this, I said, you know, what's your opinion? You see this stuff all the time, what do you like? And so what he said was, you know, if you're gonna go with SRAM, I would go with the Axis version. And if you're gonna go with Shimano, I would go with the XTR version. So a couple of things went through my mind there. Before walking into the store, I had done a bunch of research. I had watched a bunch of videos on stuff, so I was familiar with the electronic shifting. I had never tried it before on a mountain bike. I do have to say my road bike has the Shimano Di2 electronic shifters on those. And so, you know, I wasn't completely new to them, but I had never tried it on the mountain bike before. Also, I was worried about all of the things that you guys are probably worried about too. In particular, the battery. What's gonna happen with that? Is it gonna be a pain in the butt? And so I started grilling the guy. What about this? What about this? What about this? What happens when this happens? And that sort of a thing. And by the end of it, I was feeling pretty confident that it was worth giving a shot. So I went ahead and had him put it on the bike. Along with that, I do wanna say, I did upgrade the cassette from the GX version to the X01 version to try and save a little bit of weight. Again, I was going for a lightweight, kind of a high performance build for this particular bike. So I was really happy to save a few grams, and I think it actually ended up saving quite a few grams over the GX version of it. All right, so before we get too far, let me go into some of the concerns I had, you know, regarding basically having a battery-dependent shifting system on my mountain bike. All right, so I'll be answering these questions from my experience, so let's get into it. First question, are they terrible? Quick answer, no, they're actually great. Functionally, at the end of the day, they shift just the same as the mechanical ones do. They just do it in a different fashion, and they do it really well. What if the battery dies? Well, they stop working. I wish I could sugarcoat it, but literally they stop working if the battery dies. So there is a couple of things you can do to mitigate that risk. One, charge it after every single one of your rides. If you're worried about charging, here's what you can do. Say we got done with the ride, you can pop the battery out like so. And I have a little charge station over here. All I do is I just plug it in and I leave it here with the bike computer. And then I know it's always charged, so it's not a big deal. Now, to be honest, I didn't do that for quite a while, and I personally have never had a dead battery with these. It does last quite a while, but that will instantly mitigate you ever having to worry about it. The other thing you could do, and I'll try to leave a link below where you can find it on Amazon, you can always get a replacement battery, and I think they're about 60 bucks. I'll double check that, and you could just carry it with you. Throw it in your bag, throw it in your jersey, throw it in whatever you happen to keep your stuff in, and you're never without it. You can have a charger in your car, and you're always covered. Those batteries, I think they weigh like 24 or 25 grams, so it's about an ounce. Super easy, super surefire way. You're never going to have any issues with it. Next question. What if the battery falls out? Well, again, in my experience, the battery hasn't fallen out. And in fact, I remember asking the guy at the shop, hey, I noticed SRAM has a little cage thing. Should I go ahead and buy that? And his take was no. It just gets in the way and it makes it a pain in the butt to get the battery off. And of course, you need to take the battery off to charge it. I can say, in 600 miles, I have never had that battery pop off. It's never even come close. This thing is really clipped in there well. So in my experience, that's not an issue whatsoever. Next question, can you get them wet? I was actually terrified of this. I know I had seen reviews where they had soaked them in water, pulled them out, pushed the little button and the shifter just shifts. Well, I think on my first or second road trip with this thing, I had gotten stuck in a rainstorm coming back from St. George, Utah up to Salt Lake where I live. And that's about a 4-hour drive. And literally from the second I pulled out and got on the freeway until I got off the freeway, it was downpouring. I mean, buckets of rain. And in my head, at first, I kind of went through those stages of grief where you're like, oh, this is terrible. I've ruined my bike. What am I going to do? To somewhere along the ride, I just accepted it. Like, if this thing's going to take a crap and not work anymore, oh well, I guess I just have to get another one. Come to find out, I tried it as soon as I got home and I pushed that little button. It totally worked. There was absolutely no problem with it whatsoever. In fact, since then, I've gotten in a couple of rainstorms coming home and never had any issues with it. Same with washing the bike. No problems whatsoever. To add to that, I actually found this interesting graphic on the SRAM website. It describes the waterproofness or the waterproof rating of the SRAM AXS system rated at the IPX7 level, which means it can be submerged up to a meter for up to 30 minutes without any harm happening to it. So, they're actually pretty darn confident that these things are going to be waterproof. Next question, do they shift differently and or behave differently than the mechanical shifters do? And the answer is yes. They are way faster and way more adjustable. I mean, we'll get into that more later, but literally I press that button and it's instantaneously the shifts, whether it's up or down. You can control whether it shifts one gear, whether it shifts multiple gears. You can move through your whole cassette. It's almost magical. I love it. How do you set them up? Is it going to be a nightmare? And the quick answer is no. It's pretty easy. It's all done with an amp. All you have to do is click a little button, wake them up, and you have full adjustability as far as what the paddle does, how it behaves, what paddle does what sort of a thing, and it's super easy. Next question, are they easy to use? Yeah, they're way easy to use. I mean, instead of having to push through a whole range with that mechanical lever like you do in the old-fashioned ones, you just literally, boop, touch the little button and it moves. It's so slick. Okay, so I think we got through the rapid-fire questions that were running through my head that I just inundated this bike guy with when I bought it. And so let me kind of step back to some of the main points and try to answer the questions a little more thoroughly. All right, so let's talk about the charging is actually pretty slick. Like I mentioned earlier, if you just kind of change your routine and make it a habit to keep it charged, you'll never run into any issues. If you want to double protect yourself, have a backup battery. It's super easy. There are some things that kind of give you a snapshot as far as how your battery life is. My little Wahoo element will tell me when it gets critically low how I'm doing, or whether it basically says good or critically low sort of a thing, which indicates it's below 20%. That is one thing I think that these could improve on, at least as far as my setup goes. The app itself does not tell you the percentage, it just tells you kind of like a 100%, 3/4, half, or 25% sort of a thing. Again, it doesn't show you percentage, it just shows you that old-fashioned battery bar. I really do wish it told you an exact percent. Same with the Wahoo, it either says good or bad. So so I guess you're good up to about 20% battery life, then holy crap, what are you doing? Go charge the thing. Here's a fun graphic I found on the SRAM website. It looks like depending on the color of the LED that you're seeing, you can gather how long that battery is going to last you. So green, you're between 25 and 5 hours. Red, you're between 5 hours and an hour and a half. And if it's blinking red, you're less than an hour and a half. So on the paddle shifter itself, again, you've got green indicates 3 to 12 months. So that thing's going to live forever, basically. Red, 1 to 3 months. Blinking red, less than a month. So, okay, so I think we've covered the whole battery thing. Yes, it's different. And to be honest, you can definitely overcome the shortcomings by doing a little bit of preventative sort of thinking aheadness. Let's move on to performance. And I had said that they perform awesomely. Well, I don't think that adequately describes how much different it is from the mechanical shifting. I mean, when I say immediate, I really do mean immediate. As soon as you just tap that button, it's changing gear, and it's so precise and it's so amazing. I can program within the app whether a single button, well, obviously a single button touch is always going to be a single gear change. But if I hold it down, it can either remain a single gear change or a triple, or it will just keep moving through the cassette as long as I hold that button down. And that's how I currently have it, is to move all through the range. To be honest, it's probably smarter just to leave it in the 3. Depending on your pedal pressure and depending which direction you're shifting, whether it's up or down, you kind of get mixed results with that whole cassette, but you definitely can do it. You can move all the way from the top to the bottom and it will do it. So that part is super cool. Again, that I can't say enough how awesome that immediacy is. You push that button, and you're in a different gear. Okay, so along with performance, I mentioned that shifting is instantaneously. What I haven't mentioned, and again, this might be a theme with me, I may be a sucker for the way things sound. In my wheels review, I said I absolutely loved how noisy those Industry 9 Hydra hubs were. Well, these also have a very particular and fantastical sound as well. You press your downshift into a harder gear, and it gives you the coolest and most satisfying robotic electronic bzzz. Every time it moves that cassette or that chain down the cassette, it is so freaking cool how that sounds. I love it. You definitely don't get that in a mechanical shifter. Okay, so let's jump into the looks of it, right? If you're looking to completely clean your handlebars, I guess you'd have to take out your brakes or something, because you're definitely still stuck with cables on the front of your bike. And really, what difference does one cable make? I don't know. It is interesting though, and I kind of go back and forth on this, the looks of the trigger mechanism itself. It does seem that they've given it some thought. I think in the future, it could definitely be a point that they could improve on. I'm not sure why. It looks a little industrial to me. It looks a little like maybe it hobbled together. I hate to admit that. But on a few occasions, I'm staring down at it thinking, this thing's kind of ugly. So if I have a complaint or if I have a criticism, that's probably it. They could probably refine that trigger mechanism a little bit better. Okay, so going back to the performance piece, there have been 2 occasions that have stuck out in my mind as kind of being a pain in the butt with this cassette. Now, I don't know whether it's the cassette or whether it's the shifters or the combination of both. From what I understand and what I've been told, this 12 speed is a little bit finicky as far as the level of precision that it needs to be, that derailleur needs to be aligned with that cassette in order for it to behave properly. After, oh, I don't know, kind of a longer-ish ride, I noticed a strange behavior that started with this when I was pedaling. As I was pedaling down, I heard these loud pops and bangs, almost like it was misshifting. And it wasn't that I was really going after it or anything. It just, for some reason, stopped behaving itself. It wasn't changing gears, but it sure felt like it wanted to change or something was wrong with it. It was still doing it when I got home and was riding it in front of the house on the street. So to be honest, I'm not a mechanical person. I usually leverage my local bike shop for help with this kind of stuff. And so when I took it in, I left it with them and they called me back and they're like, dude, we can't replicate what you're talking about. A whole bunch of us have tried it and it seems to be working just fine. Well, that's great, except for I look like an idiot, and somehow it had just magically fixed itself. I demoed it again and test rode it again right in front of that store, and yeah, it had fixed itself. Now this has happened on 2 occasions. I don't know how it fixes itself, but it does. I've heard that these things are self-adjusting, and apparently they are. I don't know. I can say it's a bit annoying when you're not able to like replicate the problem, although it is nice that it magically fixes itself. So, okay, so let me get back to the question of the day. Would I purchase that again today after having lived with this particular build for the last 6 months, 600 miles? Quick answer, yeah, I freaking love these things. And it's not only the performance that I mentioned before, that instantaneous and very precise shifting response that you get. I recently got out my old bike, the Mach 6 with those SRAM mechanical shifters, and I was riding up and down the road, and I guess I had remembered them more fondly than they actually are, because as I was riding up the street and I was beginning to shift through the gears, I'm like, what in the world is going on here? You actually have to push this thing in. I only get 1 shift into the higher gears for every time I push this. And what is this? I have to push my thumb all the way through here to get it to move multiple times into the easier gears. What a nightmare. And I very quickly realized how much better and how much I really appreciated the precision and the performance of these. Also, again, the sound. The sound is super freaking cool. Maybe you're not a sucker for the cool little sounds like I am, but those 2 things combined, along with, I've really had no trouble with these whatsoever so far. So maybe it would be a different story if these things went dead on me and it was a nightmare and that sort of thing. But again, with a few preventative steps, they shouldn't really give you any problems. So I would pick them again. I do recommend them. And in fact, my friends that have recently bought bikes, I'm like, you should definitely go with those access shifters if you're going to spend money on a new bike. So there you go. I would love to hear from you guys. If you've had any other experience with this, please leave a comment below. I would love for this to be a conversation. And in fact, please subscribe while you're at it too. I do my best to put out content all the frickin' time. Guys, I'm super excited. And again, I hope this helps. I don't know why I'm waving at you. So I hope this helps. When you're specking out a new bike, you've got so many choices in front of you. And it's always nice to hear like a real person's take on this. And well, that was my intention with this. So at any rate, thank you. Grant, bye.